Well, good afternoon, everyone. Great to have you with us today. We've got a quick presentation around some thoughts on preparation for level 2. So just what we need to have in place for Thursday. If you joined us a few weeks ago, I've got the A team back with me here with Dave Calley and Johnny Calley. And just for those of you who haven't met either Dave or Johnny before, Dave's the Chief Executive of Master Builders. He's also a member of the Construction Accord Steering Group and was Chair of the Construction Industry Council up until last year. Johnny owns and operates Calley Homes, operating in the Bay of Plenty. They've got 25 builders. He's also a national board member and director of Master Builders, and the current chair of the residential working group, and was involved in putting together the residential version of the health and safety protocols that we are now using. All right, so gentlemen, welcome. Great to have you here.
Hey, Matt.
Cheers, Matt.
So this has been a collaboration between Master Builders and EBOSS, so appreciate you all tuning in. Now, for those of you who have been with on our webinars before, or if you haven't, you'll notice that you've got a couple of options if you'd like to ask questions or give us comments. So there's a Q&A and also a chat function. Now, if you have any specific questions that you'd like Johnny and Dave to address, I'd advise you to get that in earlier so I can just review that and bring those questions or comments in into the relevant parts of the presentation. So I'll look out for those, and we'll get started. Agenda for today is we're quickly going to look at what we've learned over the last 2 weeks. So step through a review of the industry under level 3 and the restart. We'll then go over what we need to take into consideration for level 2. Think about ideas and what we need to have in place for Thursday. And then we also just want to have a wider consideration around design considerations. So what architects and engineers should be thinking about in terms of new projects being completed under these protocols. And also an update on the supply chain. So what the supply chain can be doing to help these new protocols be adhered to. Great, so let's get started with reviewing level 3. So, Dave, what have I'll bring you in now. What have we got that we can? What's your thoughts on what we can reflect on from level 3?
Yeah, so I guess overall, I think from me is a pass mark for the industry in terms of how we've gone. There was a bit of a rush for a number of people who weren't aware of the protocols until 2 or 3 days beforehand. So there was a bit of a rush from some people. Others were more planned. And you'd expect that it'd take a bit of bedding in, that it's a new approach, that people take a little bit of time. I've certainly heard a few complaints. We've fielded a few and heard of a number. I think what's interesting, and I'll mention this more than once, that understanding construction sites are pretty visible, and the public are very, very aware of it. They know about some of the basics, about social distancing, the 1 metre or 2 metre, issues around hygiene, etc. So in some cases, the industry is more visible than anyone else. In some cases, actually, it's shown that some builders were not actually following basic health and safety anyway. The way they've dealt with the site, in some cases, wasn't just a COVID issue, but it was some basic stuff that people weren't doing. So that's made it even more obvious and more visible. But, I wouldn't say that that's the majority by any means. We've had, I think from a client point of view, clients are very sensitive to what's going on. They're watching as well, recognising it's their home. So they're very sensitive to that. And generally, I think clients have appreciated where builders have done this properly and have been serious about it. So they take that as a sign of respect. and they think that reflects on their builder in terms of whether they know what they're doing, and it gives them reassurance. So that's very positive. One of the critical things, I think, for the main contractor on the site, whether it's a larger contractor or a smaller contractor, is control of the sub-trades. It's one of the critical tasks, is managing the sub-trades, and Johnny will probably talk a bit more detail about how he's done it. So there's been some good lessons there. And the critical part of the control of the sub-trades and your own staff is how to minimise disruption. I think one of the areas that I've been interested in feedback from quite a variety of builders, big and small, is about the productivity side. And again, look, it's probably obvious, but those who are more organised felt that their productivity has picked up quite quickly as time's gone on. Others that haven't really been organised, haven't planned, then they have and probably will struggle. So the critical thing feels like almost teaching people to suck eggs, but 2 or 3 have said actually they've been quite delighted at how they picked up their productivity. Again, I think Johnny can talk about that in terms of specifics.
Dave, just so I'm clear on that, are you saying that they expected delays, but they were more efficient, so they're getting back to their sort of normal kind of program speed, or their program speed is actually quickened?
I think for most they're getting back to, but I think Johnny's probably got an example of where, with a bit of innovation, he may have even improved productivity, but I'll leave Johnny to talk about that. But you can expect with things like hand washing and so on, that the people working on the site have to get into a bit of a pattern and a groove. And the more that they understand it and it becomes natural to them, then the less they focus on that. And the danger is if you just focus on that, then you're not doing your job properly. And then the final thing I'd say is that feedback from senior officials in the construction accord has been consistently very good, that the construction industry, in terms of developing the protocols anyway, is seen as a bit of an exemplar. And looking at what's happening just in the last day with some other industries, I think others have not done their homework. So we need to keep ahead of the curve as we go along this journey.
Great. Johnny, what are your thoughts on that? Dave sort of built you up a little bit there, so set some expectations. So looking forward to hearing about what you've learned.
Yeah, look, there's 2 sides to every story, and I think that overall the bulk of the industry's worked in a really mature and sensible way. So I think there's always the ones out there that aren't prepared and have come out of lockdown a bit disorganised, but for the bulk, the ones that allowed themselves to get organised and hit level 3, and we particularly noticed, and we were expecting some delays, and we factored that into our programs. But what we actually did come across is that we were actually getting less disruption on the site. The on and off site activity can be very disruptive, and as can the amount of people on site. So I think that we had greater control over our on-site activity, and throughout that we found some efficiencies. And we're only 3 weeks into the new normal, and every day we're learning more. And like I said when we closed the last webinar, the glass half full mentality. There's some real learnings that we're finding, and as we move forward, I think we're going to have some good takeouts. So like Dave said, the clients particularly appreciate the mature way that we've responded to this. So I think greater control of the site has created some definite positives.
Great. Thanks, Johnny. Hey, now, next step for us is to get into identifying the changes for level 2. Just want to, guys, want to reflect on a couple of comments here that we can bring into, the discussion. Steve said, where do we stand in regards to having site meetings with clients again? We've got a comment around, will show homes be operating level 2? A comment saying that my workshop is looking too clean. I need to demonstrate that it's actually been used. So thanks for that, Nick. Gary's saying under level 2, is it okay for a minivan to take teams to shared sites? And we've also got a note here, protocols for designers carrying out measure-ups in people's homes when they're actually renovating. And I think travel's a good one, guys. We'll reflect a little bit on that. And Rebecca, the builders are back up since level 3, but what about home office admin? Are we better to be working from home or reopening our offices for staff? So maybe we can touch on that, Rebecca, a little bit at the end. Yeah. So Johnny, why don't we get into level changes for level 2?
Yeah, well, I think we'll cover most of those off actually, because one of the really good things about how organised the residential sector was moving into level 3 was that the protocols were designed to cover level 3 and level 2. So the changes are actually quite minor, but they actually are going to allow for most of that activity. So the first one, the show homes, they were actually able to be opened under level 3, and they had some protocols which you can find on the Chazan's website. So they're still there, and level 2 will just be a little bit less restrictive. But the site visitors are one of the, I guess, key changes. So they're allowed. It's still recommended that they're by invitation only. So clients, engineers, architects, all subcontractors and merchants are all allowed to site. But I'd pay particular attention to that activity and just minimising the flow on and off, because that will just undo a lot of the good work. You can have the best site entry in the world, but if you've got too many people on it, you've really undone all that hard work. The interregional travel's now open, so again, vehicles come into play. And the guidance from government and all sectors is that if you can keep your metre physical distance, in which in most vehicles you can, then just follow the standard protocol. So if you've got a minivan, don't just put 3 people across the seat, space them out. And so take each case as it comes in that space. Again, the merchants they're reopen, so their interface, their shops are open for retail. I'd encourage people to stick to some of the processes that they've been doing under level 3 with them closed, and really encourage some efficiencies by getting that ordering done nice and early. Councils are back up and running, as are the industry professionals. So workplaces are back open. A lot of offices will be filled up again from people that were working at home. A big one is the leaving site for lunches and materials. So again, that's able to happen, but on the premise that the site protocols are followed as you exit and as you re-enter. So again, if you limit that, you're limiting your disruption. So again, I'd recommend that you stick to the level 3 protocol. So more than one subtrade is quite a big one, because under level 3, that was recommended that only one subtrade on site at any given time. So now that's back open, but same. If you limit the flow, that's discretionary how many you have on there. But I think the government said you can only have 10 people in a social setting. So I guess do the maths around what you should or shouldn't have on a residential building site, for instance. And the working within 1 metre has come into play. So under the residential protocols, we've recommended that you still, if you can, stick to the 2 metre rule. Obviously, the government guidelines are up to 1 metre, and now they've extended that so you can work within 1 metre, but there's the additional caveat on that you must do a risk assessment form. So if you are going to be working within 1 metre, you've just got an extra step that you need to go through. But it's just one of those, with the physical distancing, it's an approach where if you can take 1 step back, you probably should, and then you've probably created that physical space. So they are the key changes to the protocol.
Johnny, can we just be a little bit more clear on that? It says, the way I read the protocols, it says you need to complete a risk assessment if you're spending time within 1 metre. So you're talking about a form. Can you just kind of clarify on how we should approach that?
Well, on the residential protocols, there is actually a form. If you download the the protocols from the CHASAN's website. There is actually a risk assessment form at the bottom of that. And so basically it's just a procedure that you should follow through, analysing the task, really making sure you've taken the hygiene steps and that you're really minimising that physical space in all cases. So you're obviously going to have to go into it, but there's just a few extra steps there.
Right. So is that something that needs to be logged? So should we have some printouts of that on site? Like, what's your advice around how you manage that?
Absolutely. It's going to come into play. So I'd have it where your site register is, and as part of your induction, make it known and keep it part of the site records. The main contractor should be keeping all the contact tracing forms and all their other health and safety protocol forms in place. And so I'd just be keeping it as per that. It's not something that you have to register to Worksafe or anything, but it's definitely a process you need to take on site.
Just on that, I've got another question from Steve. Are we using the protocols or the COVID-19 construction standards which sit above the protocols as stated on the CHASAN's website?
So I can probably answer that, Matt. So the standards are the high level, that's what you've got to achieve. The protocols are or should be completely aligned to those standards. So we think of it as the standards are what you have to achieve and the protocols are how you go about it. So the protocols are very much meant to be a practical way to achieve the standards. I think the standards are useful because you get a sense of the principles that sit behind it. And with the protocols, as we talked about last time, you can't cover every single eventuality. So you use them as your starting point, and if you're unfair, you can refer back to the standards and say, okay, what's the principle here? What am I trying to achieve? And then go around them. Matt, I can probably also cover off the question that you had about the show homes.
Right.
So show homes are already open under level 3. We were involved, the group that Johnny chairs, signing off those protocols after the initial on-site protocols. So they've been up and going for about a week. So people can again find them at the CHASAN's website. The principle there has been under level 3 that should be by appointment. So limit the number of people coming in. Interestingly, what I've heard from a couple of group home builders that use show homes as the critical part of what they do, they've said it's been quite efficient because the people coming through are the people who are serious. So in some ways, it's been more efficient. But yeah, they're all up and going, and they'll continue to be updated as we go along. I don't see a lot of changes under level 2 for the show homes.
Okay, great. Got a question here from James. Can you set up work bubbles for the same company? So should we discuss the approach to bubbles?
So are you talking about the same site, or what's the...
James, I'm not sure what your comment is. I would have thought that he's talking about for a site, would be my thought. James, if you want to add to that, you're more than welcome to just add to that chat.
Well, I think again, it's that it's the common sense approach. You've got to, there's a lot of discretion around the protocols. You've just got to question yourself every time you're doing a task. Refer back to them, and work bubbles are encouraged so that on site, particularly, you are containing everyone's activity or cross-contaminating their activity. So when you come to a contact tracing process, everyone's pretty confident and aware of where they've been and who they've been interacting with.
So with that in mind, under level 3, site meetings were discouraged. So can we talk about sort of relation to that kind of management on site, Johnny, kind of your guidance in that area?
Yeah, look, I think as we all got yesterday, the tone from the Prime Minister is that absolutely we're relaxing the rules a little bit, if you like, but take caution at every step. So we're allowing architects and clients and other people and sub-trades to site again. So I think it's just taking practical steps to manage that. So if you're having a site meeting, don't have 10 people in a huddle. Limit it to the important people, keep the physical distance, and just be sure that you aren't cross-contaminating each other within those boundaries. So yes is the answer to that question, but take a real common sense approach to it.
Johnny, this is a question quite close to my heart because we've just lodged for building consent for an alteration. Can you please discuss working on sites that are occupied? They may have their own health and safety, and with regard to long-term site work and short-term. So the like to discuss a longer-term contract, so an alteration versus a contractor visiting for a repair for a few hours.
So you're talking about the owner being occupying the site whilst, look, hey, I've got a case like that, and it's in a multi-level home, and we're just structuring the works around the owner being in different parts of that home. So it really comes down to planning and making sure that they're really aware of they should be in their own bubble. Let's go back to the bubble conversation. And then they can manage their own contact tracing, and the construction team can carry on with their own. But I think it's clear communication around where you're working, what you're doing, and making sure that the owner is contained to their own environment on that site.
And can I just add to that? And Johnny, in some cases, those principles should be applying anyway, whether or not it's COVID. That if you're working in a home, you don't want them tramping through the areas that you are or have been working in anyway.
Yeah, and as an example, we've created the construction site entry and exit and the owner-occupier site entry and exit. And so, again, it's just really about management.
Okay. And with that in mind, gentlemen, just want to come back to Jason's comment around protocols for designers carrying out measure-ups in people's homes in level 2 for renovation projects. The designers likely be in and around the home for several hours, potentially touching various surfaces and maybe even using the toilet while he's there. So some guidance for Jason and architects and designers out there about protocols on site.
Yeah, that's slightly different because you don't have a fixed site entry and exit for sanitation, but you've almost got to create a mobile one. So they will need to follow the same principles and record, contact tracing, for instance, record the people that are in and around that site, make sure they do the hand sanitation, and just be aware of the surfaces that they're touching, and just again ask the people that are in that building if they're not needed to be in a certain area just to be in another area. So it's really just turning the protocols into a mobile set of protocols.
Okay.
Can I be a bit cheeky, Matt, and say in terms of the bathroom, maybe follow the advice of my mother when I was a kid and we were going on holidays, use the bathroom before you go.
Yep.
Matt, I might just cover off the question that you that was asked earlier around offices, if that's all right.
Sure.
So we're in the similar situation. In fact, I was comparing notes with a volume builder earlier. In terms of return to offices, I think a lot of that will be about working with your staff, because there will be some staff who are nervous about returning to work. Depending on where you're at, in our situation, Wellington-based people are using public transport and lifts. So we're just going to work that through, understand their level of comfort. We will probably do that in a staged way, and because we've now learned that we can work from home pretty efficiently, we'll just do that. Initially, not everyone back at work. Those who are more comfortable and are really keen to get back to work, we'll start there. We'll limit the number of people in the office, but we'll also look at things like kitchen facilities, shared kitchen facilities, and there needs to be stricter protocols, not sharing the same lolly or cookie jar or things like that. So quite practical stuff, and thinking about regular cleaning of services. Don't share the same desk with people who are on shifts. So I think every office should also have its own management plan about how you return to work.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Dave. Johnny, just before we move on, we've kind of had quite a residential lens on this discussion so far. So any comments around how these changes apply or relate to vertical construction, commercial sites?
Yeah, in principle, they're very similar. So we didn't want to fragment the wider sector by having completely different. We know that sub-trades, for instance, work on both vertical and residential construction, so they're very similar. There's a few the vertical, but ultimately they're mainly the same. So I don't think there's too many differences there that we can go into detail on.
Okay, great. Okay, guys. So I just want to what I've been hearing is that there is a real benefit in some of these protocols in terms of not just COVID-19, but just good, just reinforcing good behaviour, good health and safety.
Yep.
The new protocols have many benefits, including giving clients some confidence that the sites have been taken care of and that's been adhered to in a safe way. Johnny, you've talked about controlling sub-trades as well, so you're seeing some benefit in the organisation there and minimising disruption. Under site management, we've got a question here from Brendan. Do we still need to zone sites?
Well, in terms of no, the sites are a lot less restrictive, but it comes down to the simple premise around the physical distance. As long as that can be maintained and there's no cross contamination, I guess, between parties, I think that a site would generally be acting or active as it normally would be, just with the protocols in place.
Okay, thank you.
Just on that, Matt, there was a few questions that came up around trying to get multiple sub-trades onto site under level 3 and zoning them. But that was when there was one subcontractor allowed on site. So I think, again, there's a lot more discretion under level 2 and on-site activity will be fairly normal, but with the physical distancing measures in place.
Okay, do you want to, Dave, talk a little bit about Worksafe as well? So, what should we expect in terms of preparation for Worksafe's activities? And do you want to talk at all around the time frame? I mean, this is not a short-term program. Yeah. So we need to have a longer-term mindset around implementing this as how we function going forward. So any comments around that sort of time frame and Worksafe's engagement?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I'll start with the Worksafe stuff. I think to date, they've probably taken a bit of a softly approach. They haven't wanted to rush out and prosecute people or anything like that. But I think that you can expect that they will start to get a bit tougher. Because people have now had time and there's no excuse for anyone not knowing. So I would expect that if people are deliberately not following the protocols, then they'll start to crack down, and that would be fair enough. And I go back to the comment that I made earlier that the construction industry is a lot more visible than many other industries. So they were probably going to receive more complaints around construction than they will other industries, just because consumers can see what's going on. So I think that's just that's my view. So I think it's just a reminder to everyone. Your point about timeframes, I think, is really critical. We've only had 2 weeks at level 3. We go into level 2, but I think we can expect whether it's level 2 or level 1 to carry on for quite a long time, and that's just because of the international situation. Certainly the comments from the Prime Minister yesterday was pretty clear about the level of trust that we're moving to, relying on people understanding what they need to do, particularly in work sites. And we hope we certainly don't go back to level 3. And I'm pretty confident we won't, but it still means we need to think about this as a new way of working, not as a short term. So Johnny's comments about learning how this can be used to your advantage, I think, is the smarter way, rather than thinking about as an imposition that we have to put up with. Just as I think a number of us have learned that we can work from home and actually get some efficiencies in doing that, I think we apply that same thinking to the work site and say, so what parts of this can actually make it a better way of working that are more efficient and that I can get some benefit in terms of my business, as well as looking after my team, my clients, etc. So it's a mindset thing, I think. As long as we think of it as an imposition, I think we limit our ability to learn.
Yep. Hey, now speaking of learning, let's just some guidance, gentlemen, for our designers, our architects and engineers. What advice do you give them in terms of recognising new projects that need to be will be delivered under these new protocols?
Yeah, maybe I'll just kick off there, Matt. I think from a general health and safety point of view, even before COVID, it was recognised that the designers have a responsibility in terms of health and safety in terms of that design. And I think people have struggled a little bit with what does that actually mean. I think with COVID, it gives it a bit of a clearer focus personally. So engineers and architects should be thinking about, probably particularly in their documentation, just not rewriting everything, but just recognising that the construction site needs to look a bit different. So helping with expectations of clients in terms of the tender process, the builder will need a slightly longer setup period to establish things. So recognise that in timeframes, help clients to understand that. There will be a little bit of extra cost, but I don't think a huge amount. And Johnny, no doubt, will have better detail than me. But I think that the designers, particularly where they are the ongoing client representative, have an opportunity to help set expectations and also lift standards overall.
So maybe setting expectations with clients around what they should expect, the approach of the builders that they're contacting. So for builders, they need to know that this is what will be expected, what clients are looking for when they're considering the main contractor for their next project.
Yeah. And also for the client saying, look, the builder is going to be required to do certain things. So the builder may say to you, here are the protocols for you coming on and off the site. I know it's your house, I know it's your property, but the builder does have requirements. So help the builder and help the client to understand what they are.
Yeah, look, just it's more about scene setting. So that's what David's saying, is basically setting the scene for what will be a longer part on site. But in terms of cost, I mean, general health and safety should be in place anyway, and things like site fences and entry and exit points should already be part of the establishment. So the cost is minimal. Depending on how individual companies are managing their sites will dictate their program. But as we're moving through this, we're learning the efficiencies, and this is very unpredictable. We don't know how long we're going to be in level 2, 4, or if we go into level 1. But if we stay planning that this is going to be the new normal for some time, and it is, because COVID's not disappearing, we can interchange between the alert levels with the least amount of disruption. And so as we move forward, if we do get a spike somewhere, go into level 3, not really a lot changes. We should be adapting to this now and preparing for this. Play the long game with it is what I'd say, and you're going to get the better outcomes. And look, another efficiency that I spoke to you guys offline about earlier is just we're about to head into winter. We'll probably find that our general health outcomes on site may be better from some of these protocols that are in place because of COVID. We've probably never seen hygiene that we're going to see through a winter period when the general colds and flus are around. So again, that's an efficiency and a positive that we need to all consider and just embrace it.
Yep. Hey, Johnny, I know that we had some guidance come out yesterday around variations to do with COVID-19. So if anyone's not aware of that, they should check that out on the MB website. We've got 9 or so minutes left, guys. So just a quick comment on those. And Dave, it looks like Wellington's the sun is set where you are.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's hard to get it.
It'll rise again tomorrow, though, Matt. Don't worry.
Good. Yep. No, it's a bit dark behind you there. Johnny's looks like he's beaming and still in Bay of Plenty sunshine there. So
it's overcast but still sunny. It's the Bay of Plenty.
Yep.
Just on the it's really hard to get into individual contracts, but I mean some of the recommendations is talk to the clients, talk about what the impacts are, whether they're COVID. There are definitely COVID-related impacts. And I guess just try and have a conversation about sharing the load on it. I think if you go in one-dimensional and one-sided, you're probably going to get a negative reaction.
Yep.
So I think if you go in and just try and work through it, individual contracts, and I know the Master Builders one, for instance, has clauses in there that will no doubt have coverage for the builder. But I think in the first instance, discuss it through, try and share the load, and if you come unstuck, then take some advice. Contracts are inherently difficult, but I think it's easier to communicate in the first instance, and then you'll get a better outcome.
Okay, great. Now moving on, just thinking about the thoughts on the supply chain under level 2. Johnny, you've mentioned that merchants are open, so that's a significant change from level 3. Any further comments around what suppliers and distributors and merchants can be doing to, I suppose, reinforce or work with the protocols?
Yeah, look, to be honest, I've got to say I've been reasonably, or the people that we work with in particular have been really good in adopting and working with the construction teams. The messaging that they're extremely busy because obviously what they're doing, handpicking materials in yards, and they're going through a few extra steps. So again, be prepared. They're going to go through some delays, but I think don't expect to just walk into their retail stores as we normally did pre-COVID. I think just and respect their environment and allow for some minor disruptions with our supply chain.
Got a comment here around the role for off-site manufacturing and prefabrication. So I think a time for the supply chain to be thinking about what they can be marketing or presenting as solutions to recognise the material handling on site, and also minimising the amount of subtrades or people to get things installed or just handled on site. So what about just general documentation and deliveries? How does that work under level 2? And under level 3, we were paperless. Does that continue?
Yeah, look, I think that we should be carrying all of those. I mean, we worked in lockdown completely paperless for 5 weeks, and then we went through a period of level 3 where everything was basically online ordering. So extend that through into level 2. Not much has changed from our protocols in that space. So they're all behaviours that I'd encourage to be working through all the alert levels and beyond, to be honest.
We've got a couple of questions here. Sophia's talking about how can we get good quality site sign images that are in the level 2 protocol PDF on the Chazan website. She's saying that the image forms on the current PDFs are not that clear for printing. So I think if we could give some feedback to Chazan's, or if we've got some direction on that, Sophia would appreciate it.
Just on there should be a JPEG file that just gets emailed straight to sign writers. So that JPEG file would be able to be used in general office printing as well.
Okay. is using apps for site access a good way to go for contract tracing? Do you have any comments around the effectiveness of just using pen and paper versus getting more high tech?
Look, from a practical point of view, I can definitely say that it's not one of my favourite things, going and washing my hands, having wet hands, and then having to sign in on paper. So any form of technology would be encouraged, and it does simplify it, I think. But there's a few platforms starting to emerge. So again, with time, that type of thing's going to really evolve, and I think that if you can adopt it, that would make for easier contact tracing.
Okay, well, gentlemen, why don't we just aim to sort of summarise here? So, Dave, sort of your final thoughts.
Yeah, look, I think it won't go too long, but look, I think we've made a good start as an industry. Level 2 is we need to keep the eye on the ball. Don't get slack about this. Think about this as an ongoing process. The other thing, as I mentioned earlier, just listening over the last 24 hours, other industries that are about to go back, it doesn't sound as though some of those industries are particularly well organised. We have done well out of this, and I think a more general comment from me is the construction industry certainly has its fair share of issues about different parts of the industry not working that well together at times. Through the construction accord, what I've seen is the industry come together and really work very well together. And that's one of the things I really pray that we can hang on to into the longer term, because it's better for all of us. It makes for a better industry to work in, a more efficient industry, and better for our clients. So let's think of what we're doing in terms of the site protocols as just part of that process, that we've got an opportunity to improve our productivity and our performance, and let's grab it.
Great, thanks, Dave. Johnny, final thoughts from you?
Yeah, look, I think Dave summed it up pretty nicely just there. As we move into level 2, for those that struggle to, I guess, be prepared heading into level 3, take the opportunity this week as we head into level 2 just to reset. I think it's one of those ones where sometimes if you stop, reset, and go again, you really just create some efficiencies. And I think that there's a lot of good to come out of this. So working with a positive mindset is really going to help how we all move into the future. And we're all helping each other out by creating a good look for the industry. Before I just one last thing, there are some protocols with back to work mental health as well on the latest version moving into level 2. And I'd encourage, I have seen a bit of this happening, and the mates in construction is there's some work on there. So I encourage people to talk to their staff about that at the very least.
So, gentlemen, any advice on where we should be going just to keep up to date with developments? Because things will change. So we've talked about Chazans, we've talked about mates in construction. Johnny, great point reference there. The MB website. Any other thoughts around what we should be keeping an eye out for?
I think those are the key sites in terms of the protocols. I mean, we obviously will, from a master builder's point of view, keep putting out information to our members. I think one of the big challenges that we've got as an industry is the level of work that we've got coming up. That's a whole different subject. So we're just turning our mind to how we try and maintain consumer confidence, for instance, that everyone doesn't just stop work going. And that's where, again, as an industry, we need to work together. We need to communicate with potential clients about this might be actually a good time to get some of that work done.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks for that, Dave. We were given some early grace with opening up before some other industries. So let's repay back some of that government confidence and keep the industry as something that's as part of the economy that's actually addressing this and moving forward constructively. Gentlemen, I appreciate all your time this afternoon. I'd like to say thank you to all of our contributors here, wherever you are, and lots of the positive comments that have come through. We'll have a recording of this webinar that you'll be able to share with colleagues if you'd like to. But on behalf of EBOSS and Master Builders, thank you for your attendance. Johnny and Dave, appreciate your efforts and time. Everyone have a wonderful night and a successful and safe start into level 2 on Thursday.
Thank you, Matt.
For you attendees, I'm just going to launch a poll now, just as you exit, if you don't mind just giving us some feedback on the information you've received today. But apart from, with that aside, gentlemen, thanks for your time. Have a good evening.